want to talk about an introduction to the conference, talking in terms of Sustainable Development Goals and also UN Women. Two of these kind of groups that I've become involved with in the past few years. I'm an advisor for the Fashion and Lifestyles Partnership for UN SDGs, in an advisory role there, which has been growing from the fashion industry, and we're trying to get this to grow with the jewelry industry, and also through the Responsible Jewelry Transformative and the work with Morangi Women's Alliance. We've really taken a deep dive with the UN Women Generation Equality markers, and we've joined the Action Coalition. And these two kind of frameworks have meant a lot in my journey in shaping ways that I think we can make interventions towards responsible jewelry. So I think everyone's pretty familiar with all of the goals. I don't go through all of them in this presentation, but I'm focusing on the one that I think is the biggest thing as far as protecting the industry. And this is a conversation that we hear a lot. How do we protect the industry? And everybody has a view on how to protect the industry. And this kind of comes into the SDGs, not only in how we have awareness, how we really go after some of the Sustainable Development Goals, how we address them, but also in what I feel is the biggest risk to the industry, and that is the number one goal, poverty. When people can see the disparity between a luxury industry and the poverty that exists at the beginning of our supply chain, to me, that is our biggest risk. And in the year 2023 and onward, it's something that we can't hide and we can't gloss over, or we can't greenwash. So I think addressing poverty is one of the biggest areas that we need to think about in being responsible. And my own definition of responsible is that we are responsible for what we buy and what we use in our supply chain and those who we impact. So, opening markets for artisanal miners. This is our first panel. As most of us know, there are already over 40 million ASM, artisanal and small-scale miners globally. And we see one of the biggest ways to help lift them out of poverty is to support them in ways that we can, and we'll be talking about one of those ways in that first panel. Deep sea fishing is coming along the way as well. And we might see how nations want this to lift them out of poverty, and there's going to be, so much discussion around this now and in the future. There are some relationships to look at, whether we're talking about artisanal indigenous fisheries, or also when a lot of vulnerable nations go into relationships with corporate miners, and how do we see that as maybe that's a way that people think they can alleviate poverty for their nation. Maybe that's a way where that doesn't work out, depending on how these relationships are formed in corruption. Responsible silver. This is the first time we're really talking about this. We know, ways that gold affects poverty globally, and we're going to talk about standards in silver. That this panel is going to be very broad, and I think this is the beginning of understanding how silver mining, how artisanal silver miners, and how we can affect and alleviate poverty through our silver supply chain. African mining vision is going to be, we have a virtual presentation about that. And this is the African Union's idea of how they can benefit the most from the minerals that they have. And so in my opinion, who better, if we're talking specifically about our supply chain from Africa, to talk about how we can use this to alleviate poverty than the African Union. Morangi Women's Alliance and sex trafficking. Sex work and sex trafficking, as we'll see in that panel, is directly related to poverty. And the most vulnerable people end up in sex work and sex trafficking due to poverty. Responsible retail. This will be a good one to understand, how do we address this? How does a retailer address the poverty that exists in our supply chain? If they do, how do they? And Anna Barra is going to discuss how she frames that into having a retail store and talking to the end consumers. source country traders in the gemstone supply chain. So in this panel, we talk about the livelihoods of everybody in the gemstone community. And we'll hear some of the views of people that feel that the way to alleviate poverty is by working directly with them, formalizing these relationships, and moving forward. Gold and agriculture. So as we know, a lot of the gold miners don't necessarily in ASM benefit from their work as much as they should. In bringing agriculture alongside of it and sustainable livelihoods that are being built within the mining communities are one way to alleviate poverty. Russian sanctions. Sanctions always have a double-edged sword. We may be taking away markets from ASM, from miners, from people in communities, but a lot of times the sanctions are in place to quell drivers of poverty such as war and human rights. Migration and minerals, we'll be hearing about that. Migrants often leave their countries to get away from poverty, but then migrants also are much more likely to live in poverty once they're in a new place. And the minerals that we use in our supply chain are affecting migrations and rushes into communities that end up moving people and changing their lives. So I'm only going to go through a few of these, but this is showing both sides. And I think in order for us to really talk about the Sustainable Development Goals, we have to do both sides. So zero hunger. We have our supply chains and our food instability is sometimes negatively impacted by mining, like indigenous people that get mercury into their food supply and into the rivers. But we also have initiatives like we were just talking about, agriculture at the mines. During COVID, people from throughout the jewelry industry, corporations, gemstone groups, NGOs, acted and did food drives to mining communities. We all saw that there was a need to support those in our supply chain, and we came forward and did that. So I think showing both sides of food insecurity and where we can help end hunger is a part of the whole picture. Both of these are true as far as education goes. In Botswana, they have been funding schools and helping make sure that children are eating when they're at schools. And that's, De Beers and the diamonds that are coming out of there doing this. But we also have areas like in Marangi, Zimbabwe, where a school was demolished. And the children that had to walk over 10 miles to get to that school no longer had a school at all. So we have to talk about both sides all the time, because otherwise within the industry, we can't really make a difference. Good health and well-being. I don't know if anyone's ever been inside of a mine. I was inside of a small tunnel mine in Voi, Kenya, 3 weeks ago, and the air quality was so bad. We have Pauline Mundia here who speaks about TB throughout Africa, bringing awareness. So we have to think about the good health and the well-being of people in those working conditions. And then we have somebody like Toby Pomeroy, who's doing mercury-free mining, and who is actively working within the jewelry industry and has a background as a jeweler to eradicate mercury for those working in gold mining. So I'm going to skip quickly to UN Women, because this is another area that I've been really doing a deep dive in a number of ways through Marangi Women's Alliance and the work that we do, and Abby's here today from Marangi Women's Alliance. Marangi, Zimbabwe, which is a diamond community, is well known to everybody, is kind of the model of what not to do. And we've been on a journey since starting Marangi Women's Alliance where we've seen an impact in improving human rights and improving a lot of conditions for women. But what we see now is a model of this is the impact that mining can have, that this diamond mining rush had on the women, that's a lasting impact. So at this point, what do we do? And when I was at I went to the UN Women Conference in New York this year, and it was on tech, women in tech. And I was really kind of blown away by how much some of these interventions make, how much we had done in Morangi just by bringing tech there and by connecting women with data. And it shows that these pillars that UN Women has put onto their action coalition are real pillars that we should look at, and that we can see in any of these mining communities or any communities in jewelry where we want to make a difference, to go in and intervene with the women. Gender-based violence. So here we see all sorts of gender-based violence in Morangi that gets brought up. We're focusing on sex work and sex trafficking. And a lot of this has come because these were 26 villages that lived traditionally, and they were herders, they had family structures, they were generational in this land, and they lost that. So in losing that, now we're seeing a lot of repercussions that are generational, that are gender-based violence, that we need to turn around. Economic rights and justice. In Morangi, they're still not seeing a profit, an economic plus from their diamonds. And so how do we get there? How do we turn this around? There's really just baby steps to get economic justice and rights right now. It's going to have to go to bringing back livelihoods that people had, new livelihoods, and finding a way forward. And really, all of this comes from the women that live there, because we don't know how to do that. Only they know how to do that, but they've got to start from square one now. Feminist movements in leadership. So Morangi Women's Alliance is one, but we have feminist movements and leaderships throughout the jewelry industry. Women's Jewelry Association, AWEAM, African Women in Mining. There are feminist movements throughout the jewelry industry, throughout the world globally, that are making a difference. So the more that we can support feminist movements and leadership everywhere, I think the more impact we can have. Feminist action for climate change. Again, going back to the impacts of mining. We permanently, in communities, affect the environment. And tailing ponds we talked about last year. Tailing ponds are one here that's a problem in Morangi. It spreads malaria, it spreads mosquitoes, malaria, and they've had a number of different diseases coming through. So UN Women puts in climate action and justice. So how can we keep on looking at that? How can we keep on making this better? And of course, this is also a global thing that we need with climate change. Technology and innovation for gender equality. It's amazing what we can do with technology now to connect people, to give people a path to peer-to-peer support, for women just to be able to communicate on an equal level is something that we're not seeing in the world right now. And we all know as women, we love communicating and we love talking with each other. So the more that we can just support that simple thing for women to be able to talk and communicate on an equal level, we can see global change with just that. Bodily autonomy and sexual reproductive health and rights. This is Morangi Women's Alliance partnered with a mission of nurses from the church, and they went in to the community and they were doing STD testing and handing out condoms, and this is all women-driven to help women. So I think the other thing about UN Women is that the jewelry industry it's a woman's industry. I mean, it hasn't always been, but we're here to take over. And so we're here to support each other and here to grow. And I think if we look at those things that UN Women has marked to work on, I think we can make great strides. So this is what we all want, right? We all want to use the SDGs to market our jewelry, and we all can, and we all should. But I think we need to just keep on working at those pillars that they want us to work on and keep on addressing the whole. So that's what we're here for today. Tomorrow we're going to have collaborative sessions where everyone just talks about how they want to work on the SDGs, what they want to see, and we'll move forward with that. And so this is on the UN building. It's one of the sculptures and one of the things that they have written there, one of the plaques. Human beings are members of a whole, in creation of one essence and soul. If one member is afflicted with pain, other members uneasy will remain. And that's from a poem there that's listed on there. So thank you so much. Enjoy. And I'm so glad we're all in this together and going through this. And welcome to the conference.